Hello students, welcome to my class on John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost Book 1. I am Professor Jaspreet Kaur, Associate Professor, Postgraduate Department of English, Cultural Studies and Foreign Languages at Khalsa College, Patiala. Let me introduce the poet John Milton to you. John Milton was born in London in 1608 at the height of the Protestant Reformation in England. His father was a law writer who had achieved some success by the time Milton was born. This prosperity afforded Milton an excellent education, first with private tutoring, then a private school, and finally Cambridge. Milton, a studious boy, excelled in languages and classical studies. His father had left Roman Catholicism, and Milton was raised Protestant, with a heavy tendency towards Puritanism. As a student, he wanted to go into the ministry, but was disillusioned with the scholastic elements of the clergy at Cambridge. Cambridge, however, afforded him time to write poetry. After Cambridge, he continued his studies for 7 years in a leisurely life at his father's house. It was here that he wrote some of his first published poems, including Commerce and Lycidas, both of which he published in 1645. Milton toured the European continent in 1638 to 1639 and met many of the great Renaissance minds, including Galileo and Grotius. The beginning of the Puritan Revolution found Milton back in England, fighting for a more humanist and reformed church. For more than 20 years, Milton set aside poetry to write political and religious pamphlets for the cause of the Puritanism. For a time, he served as secretary for social tongues under Cromwell. Milton was a mixed product of his time. On the one hand, as a humanist, he fought for religious tolerance and believed that there was something inherently valuable in man. As a Puritan, however, he believed that the Bible was the answer and the guide to all, even if it went against democracy itself. Where the Bible did not afford an answer, Milton would turn to reason. Let us now understand what is an epic. An epic is a long narrative poem written in elevated style, presenting characters of high position in adventures, forming an organic whole through their relation to a central heroic figure and through their development of episodes important to the history of a nation or a race. Following are the main characteristics of an epic. Number 1, it opens in medias res. Medias res means in the middle of the story. Then, the setting is vast, covering many nations, the world, or the universe. It begins with an invocation to a muse, which is known as epic invocation. It starts with the statement of the theme, It includes the use of epithets. It contains a long list of characters which is known as epic catalogue. It features long and formal speeches. It shows divine intervention on human affairs and star heroes that embody the value of the civilization. Conventions of epic. So, an epic opens by stating the theme or cause of the epic. This may take the form of a purpose, as in Milton, who proposed to justify the ways of God to men, of a question, as in Iliad, which Homer initiates by asking a muse to sing of Achilles' anger, or of a situation, as in the Song of Roland. And next convention of epic is invocation. The writer invokes a muse, one of the 9 daughters of Zeus. The poet prays to the muses to provide him with divine inspiration to tell the story of a great hero. Then in medias res means the narrative opens in the middle of things with the hero at his lowest point. Usually flashbacks show earlier portion of the story. Then is enumeration. Catalogues are given. These long lists of objects, places, and people place the finite action of the epic within a broader universal context. Often, the poet is also paying homage to the ancestors of audience members. And then are epithets. Heavy use of repetition or stock phrases. For example, Homer's rosy-fingered dawn and wine-dark sea. Importance of prologue. Milton opens Paradise Lost by formally declaring his poem's subject. And what is the subject? Humankind's first act of disobedience towards God and the consequences that followed from it. The act is Adam and Eve's eating of the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, as told in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. In the first line, Milton refers to the outcome of Adam and Eve's sin as the fruit of the forbidden tree, punning on the actual apple and the figurative fruits of their actions. Milton asserts that this original sin brought death to human beings for the first time, causing us to lose our home in paradise until Jesus came to restore humankind to its former position of purity. Milton's speaker invokes the muse, a mystical source of poetic inspiration, to sing about these subjects through him. But he makes it clear that he refers to a different muse from the muses who traditionally inspired classical poets by specifying that his muse inspired Moses to receive the 10 Commandments and write Genesis. Let us begin our epic poem, Book 1, with prologue and invocation. The beginning of Paradise Lost is similar in gravity and seriousness to the book from which John Milton takes much of his story. And that book is the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. The Bible begins with the story of the world's creation, and Milton's epic begins in a similar vein, alluding to the creation of the world by the Holy Spirit. The first two sentences, or first 26 lines of Paradise Lost, are extremely compressed, containing a great deal of information about Milton's reasons for writing his epic, his subject matter, and his attitude towards his subject. In these two sentences, Milton invokes his muse, which is actually the Holy Spirit rather than one of the 9 muses. By invoking a muse, but differentiating it from traditional muses, Milton manages to tell us quite a lot about how he sees his project. In the first place, an invocation of the muse at the beginning of his epic is conventional. So, Milton is acknowledging his awareness of Homer, Virgil, and later poets, and signaling that he has mastered their formal and wants to be a part of their tradition. But by identifying his muse as the divine spirit that inspired the Bible and created the world, he shows that his ambitions go far beyond joining the club of Homer and Virgil. Milton's epic will surpass theirs, drawing on a more fundamental source of truth and dealing with matters of more fundamental importance to human beings. At the same time, however, Milton's invocation is extremely humble, expressing his utter dependence on God's grace in speaking through him. Milton thus begins his poem with a mixture of towering ambition and humble self-effacement, simultaneously tipping his hat to his poetic forebears and promising to soar above them for God's glorification. Milton's approach to the invocation of the muse, in which he takes a classical literary convention and reinvents it from a Christian perspective, sets the pattern for the entire Paradise Lost. For example, when he catalogues the prominent devils in hell and explains the various names they are known by and which cults worshipped them, he makes devils of many gods whom the Greeks, Ammonites, and other ancient people worshipped. In other words, the great gods of the classical world have become, according to Milton, fallen angels. His poem purports to tell of these gods' original natures before they infected humankind in the form of false gods. Through such comparisons with the classical epic poems, Milton is quick to demonstrate that the scope of his epic poem is much greater than those of the classical poets, and that his worldview and inspiration is more fundamentally true than theirs. The setting or world of Milton's epic is large enough to include those smaller classical worlds. Milton also displays his world's superiority while reducing those classical epics to the level of old, nearly forgotten stories. For example, the 9 muses of classical epics still exist on Mount Helicon in the world of Paradise Lost. But Milton's muse haunts other areas and has the ability to fly above those other less powerful classical muses. Thus, Milton both makes himself the authority on antiquity and subordinates it to his Christian worldview. The Iliad and the Aeneid are the great epic poems of Greek and Latin respectively. And Milton emulates them because he intends Paradise Lost to be the first English epic. Milton wants to make glorious art out of the English language the way the other epics had done for their languages. Not only must a great epic be long and poetically well constructed, its subject matter must be significant and original, its form strict and serious, and its aim noble and heroic. In Milton's view, the story he will tell is the most original story known to man, as it is the first story of the world and of the first human being. Also, while Homer and Virgil only chronicled the journey of heroic men like Achilles or Aeneas, Milton chronicles the tragic journey of all men, the result of mankind's disobedience. Milton goes so far as to say that he hopes to justify or explain God's mysterious plan for humankind. Homer and Virgil describe great wars between men, but Milton tells the story of the most epic battle possible, the battle between God and Satan, good and evil. I end my presentation of John Milton's Paradise Lost Part 1 here. I will see you with Part 2, where you will know the rest of the story.